Back on First and Now, the official BC Lions podcast. Matt Baker alongside Nick Kowalski. As we speak, news is happening. Players are re-signing. Others might go to market. We shall see. The shopping season is just around the corner, otherwise known as free agent season. Nick, how goes it, big man?
Doing well. We're into February now. Like you just teased, we got some exciting new signings to talk about, especially on the defense here. But yeah, things are going well. How about you?
Yeah, things are lovely, and we'll get to it in just a moment. I know some outside observers may be a little nervous about the offense, particularly when it comes to quarterback, but we've talked a lot about how Vernon Adams Jr. will be well-suited having an offense rebuilt to his strengths. But yes, a couple key pieces on defense. One, right before we started recording, that we'll get to in a second, but we're not inside the Wall Center today, not inside the Go-Goat Sports Studios as per usual. Sekeres and Price, though, pretty victorious week. They've had some great guests on the podcast. Looking forward to hearing the likes of former BC Lion Tom Larscheid, just to name a couple. But we were victorious. That sports trivia event we were tweeting about, Nick. The Sekeres and Price team. The pros took down the Joes. A great night at the St. James's Well pub. And some tough categories. There was even a BC Lions category, which I obviously aced, but great to be out with Sekeres and Price doing a little sports trivia. The invite was extended to you, but you couldn't get out to Port Moody. You missed a good time, though.
Oh, yeah, unfortunately not, because I'll never turn down a shot to get to Port Moody. But yeah, couldn't make it out that night, unfortunately. Sounded fun, though.
It was, and it was great to be recruited by the team. Matt Sekeres, Grady Sass, their producer on Sekeres and Price, Miles Bruce, Go-Goat Sports legends all around. So look forward to doing that again one time. And yes, it was the folks at Yellow Dog who played a big role in organizing it. Love Yellow Dog. We'll hopefully be back in the studio in a week or two, get into the beer fridge once again. But we mentioned it. It has been a great last couple of weeks, really. Again, as we record this on a Thursday, we are, inside of 2 weeks to go. This Sunday is the quote-unquote legal tampering period. Other teams can start talking to other pending free agents from around the league. Offers can be made, can't be signed until the 14th. But we want to focus on a few key ones who are staying around. Let's start new and work back. Again, just about an hour or so before we started this episode, kind of had to regroup the topics a little bit because All-Star Gary Peters, shutdown corner, had himself a career year in 2022. He's locked in for 2 more years. So he joins the likes of TJ Lee and Bo Lacumbo, Josh Banks, who we'll all talk about. A key piece of this defense is sticking around, Nick.
So excited to see the news about GP because, in my opinion, I don't think there's a better cornerback in the entire CFL than Gary Peters. You could maybe even extend that to defensive back. I mean, like you said earlier, he's a shutdown player on that corner. Gets along really well with the DBs in this room, as well as Coach Ryan Phillips, but also got 5 interceptions last season. And I know that was a big talking point the year before, that he didn't get a single one in a group that got a lot. But yeah, he's shown to have good hands, really good at locking players down. I know he's a player that the team is comfortable with just isolating on a receiver and letting him do his job and take that receiver away. And yeah, just excited to have Gary back on the team this year and the next year too.
And another 2-year deal again. So a good core of veterans sticking around. It's going to be Grey Cup's the goal this year. I mean, the step this team took last year, clearly it will be a disappointment if they don't get to the game, in my opinion. I know a lot of people out there, myself included maybe to an extent, still say it goes through Winnipeg. We'll see what these other teams do in free agency. But 2024 Grey Cup at BC Place, and there looks to be a veteran-laden core going to be sticking around. So, and you said it, in terms of being a pure shutdown corner, Peters proved he is just that last season. Mentioned Josh Banks, a valuable member in the run-stopping game, defensive tackle, another 2-year extension for the Night Train. It's an area that got exposed, let's be honest, Nick, and we'll get Giulio Caravatta's thoughts. They might be trying to sign another one of these guys once the market opens, but glad that Banks is sticking around as well.
Yeah, Josh Banks, he falls into that category of one of the more underappreciated players in the CFL. I think if you talk to players, coaches throughout this league, they know who he is and how he can be a force up the middle. And I was even talking to some of our guys who were out training here, and I was asking them that question, saying, Josh Banks, players know how good he is, and just ask like what makes him so good. And the guys here, they were just talking about the force that he uses. He loves going up with a bull rush just because of how strong he is. But now he's also been able to use moves off that bull rush that have really developed his game in the CFL, and especially this past season being his second full year up here in Canada. But then he's also someone who can plug up double teams, or he takes double teams up the middle, which frees up the linebackers to be able to make the tackles in the run game. So just a very underappreciated guy, and he's a key guy to have back too.
So 2 years for Banks. Again, loving this continuity in a very, very big way. And again, building not only for this year, but down the road. Want this team to maintain its contender status and be a nice combination of veterans and exciting youngsters coming to training camp. Another one that, might not have moved the meter, but a very important signing. David Neville. This is a guy who missed the entire 2022 campaign, just bad injury luck. I think he had some ankle problems in camp, and then he injured his shoulder, ended up having to have his labrum completely repaired, missed the entire season. Last year was David's year. Nebraska Cornhusker, draft pick by the Lions in 2018. And he's going to get a chance to prove he can still earn a regular spot in this offensive line. You need offensive line depth, and Neville will be a nice little bonus on the roster once we get going in camp, Nick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm definitely looking forward to watching him in training camp. I think he's one of the more intriguing players that's going to have to fight for he could be fighting for a starting job come training camp, which is going to be a big storyline coming up. But yeah, he's someone with a lot of potential. Just hasn't been able to stay healthy, but 6'8", 325 pounds, like you said, played at Nebraska, Power 5 college. So a lot of potential in David Neville, and I'm excited to see what he could do with that.
And another guy, going back to last week after our most recent recording, we had Dominique Rhymes on last week. Very good interview with the Lions receiving leader. Make sure you check that out on First and Now. But later in last week, Isaiah Messam, 2-year deal. Again, another draft pick, homegrown player by this organization. This is a guy I'm interested to see if he might push for some more reps on defense. Of course, he was a defensive back in 2019, started a bit, made the switch, a solid depth piece behind the likes of Bo Lacumbo, Jordan Williams, Ben Haladic, great national group of players there. Messam, though, with 40 special teams tackles over the last few seasons and reliable foot soldier hanging around, Nick.
Yeah, great on the teams. It was just behind Kevin Francis for not even the team league, but the league lead in special teams tackles. Messam having 16 last year, like you said, 40 throughout his 4 seasons in the CFL. So he's very valuable in that aspect. And yeah, he got meaningful reps in 2019 on defense, and he's definitely capable of playing snaps on defense. And Coach Ryan Phillips knows that, but that's probably a goal of Messam's this year, is to get more time during the other 2 phases of the defensive phase of the football game to get on the field.
And the final one we'll talk about here came down after our last episode. Mentioned his name a minute ago, but Bo Lacumbo, his return in 2021 was the CFL's most outstanding Canadian. Both you and I were there at the awards night in Hamilton, seeing him get that well-earned award. And this past year was kind of more of a tandem situation there at will with Jordan Williams, but that's a development on the roster that turned out good. Keeps both guys fresh, both amazing athletes, but Bo Lacumbo sticking around in the Lions' den, another key veteran, will be here.
Similar, we talked about Neville having a pretty high ceiling just based on his size. Like Bo Lacumbo is another guy that I think of with such a high ceiling, and we saw that in 2021 when he won his Most Outstanding Canadian award. Like you just look at the stats for a season, and they're stuffed everywhere. 4 sacks, 3 picks, a touchdown, a forced fumble. Over 60 tackles, over 10 special teams tackles. So he's someone who can do it all. He's been asked to play a lot of different roles, especially last season, like you said, playing in a tandem. He was also a gunner on special teams, which means that you're the outside guy, kind of the contain guy when on the punt team. So that's another important role that he took on last season. And yeah, just a versatile guy, local guy, involved in the community, and a good guy overall to have back too.
Head to bclions.com for all the latest news, all of the signings. Stephen Chang going to have a nice feature up on Josh Banks, one of the newly re-signed guys we've just spoken about. He has a 5 things to know about Terry Williams, speaking of speedsters on special teams. So, and we'll continue to break it all down as the news continues to trickle in here. I would imagine there'll be even more to talk about by the time we do another episode of First and Now. And very interested to get the thoughts of Giulio Caravatta, longtime Lions analyst, of course, on radio and various platforms. Giulio will also maybe get his thoughts on what he thinks this team should add. It's great that they're re-signing some guys, but like we talked about, all teams have holes, even the team that hoists the Grey Cup. Certain areas complement the other, but where should the Lions be looking to add? What are Giulio's thoughts on Vernon Adams Jr.? That's coming up with Giulio on First and Now. And we've tracked the man down, a former BC Lion, member of the SFU. I don't know if we're allowed to say the old nickname anymore, but he was a proud SFU. He wasn't a red leaf. We know that, yeah. Giulio. How you doing, bud?
Good, guys. How are you? Thanks for accommodating me yesterday. I've been sick the last couple of days, but feel much better today. So
that's great. Yeah, it's funny. We do usually leave you alone in January. You go into post Christmas, post season hiatus, so to speak. You kind of go off the grid. I know, but we were able to track you down on February 1st. How's it been? How's the off season been? You must be excited that we're entering the exciting part of the off season here.
Yeah. No, I'm sure I'm like everybody else. I mean, after the season, you're always a little bit, always a little bit burnt out, and it's always a long year. But like you guys, right? You guys put a lot of hours in, and then when you get through December and January, and then all of a sudden you get to February and you're realizing, hey, it's just right around the corner, right? So I'm like everybody else. I'm excited, especially with free agency coming up. What the Lions are going to do, what everyone else is going to do. Obviously, lots of talk about the quarterbacks, and there was lots of talk about Nathan, and so. But it's nice to talk some football again, guys, for sure.
We had Vernon Adams Jr. on an episode 2 weeks ago. He's all in. He's excited, and I think it's, we wish Nathan Rourke all the best, but
yeah,
it's another new era starting, so to speak, even though he was here for half of last year. But you spent some time with him. Just your overall thoughts on Vernon Adams Jr. and your expectations of him for a full season starting in training camp.
Yeah, I honestly, I think Vernon deserves so much credit for what happened last year. I don't think people realize how difficult the situation that is to come into what he did with the Lions. Even though Vernon's a veteran, he's like all of us, right? He's got a family, he's got kids, and to move and get traded halfway through a year and have to deal with all the things that go on off the field. And then to be able to commit himself to learning an offense, and there was a lot of pressure here. This offense was really, flying along with Nathan, and for him to come into the situation that he did and be able to, to succeed the way he did. He was 4-2 as a starter, and I just thought, that he did an outstanding job. I really I'm excited about the year coming up because I think with Jordan McSimmick now knowing that Vernon's going to be the guy, and Jordan is such a smart guy, and his ability to call plays and build an offense. I think a lot of people don't realize that offense last year was built around Nathan's strengths. Vernon comes in, he's trying to learn the offense, he's trying to, to try to make it work for him. But I think with a whole off season of really, exploiting what what Vernon does best is really going to be something to watch because I think Vernon has proven that he's a very exciting quarter. He's perfect for this league. And I think that he's going to be one of those guys that can do a lot of great things. And I'm, for one, excited with the people that he's surrounded with and his skill set. I'm excited to see what that offense is going to look like in training camp.
And then Giulio, maybe outside of the five guys who are blocking Vernon up front, maybe his favorite teammates might be the receivers that he's throwing the ball to. And then now he's got an offseason where everyone from Dominique Grimes and Lucky Whitehead to Alex Hollins and Josh Pearson are all coming back. How important is it for Vernon to have that going in, that confidence that all the receivers he's working with last season, they're all coming back for another full season with him?
Yeah, no, it's huge, Nick. It's huge. Anytime that you've already started that relationship where you're building that camaraderie and that chemistry, obviously it was only a half a year, but you start to get a real feel for guys and how they operate, how they work, what kind of guys they are and how to motivate and how to talk to guys. I mean, that's a big part of it. So I think that's going to be big factor for Vernon going into this new year is already having built a relationship with a lot of these guys. They know what Vernon's about. They know what his skill set's like. And now it's just about building that chemistry. And, again, like you say, the having all those guys return. And then, as you said, too, the guys like Alexander Hollins, who really didn't miss a beat, really, when he got into the lineup. Really, he was outstanding. Really. And I think, he is poised to really kind of maybe be a guy that has a breakout year that no one knows about because I was super impressed with his ability and what the dimension that he brought to that offense. So, I mean, they've got all the pieces. They have all the pieces. So, I'm expecting big things from the Lions offense for sure.
Free agency just around the corner, Giulio. Factoring in still some key guys eligible to hit the market here that I know Neil and Rick are trying to keep around. But when you look at it the way it is, what's a need for this team on February 14th in your mind?
That's a really good question. It's something that I think. Honestly, if I'm being totally honest, I think probably more of a physical presence inside on that defensive line. I think like a big body that can take up two guys and move the pocket. And I know I probably said this far too often last year because my hope was that he was going to see the field, and we never did because I thought that he was going to have a huge impact on that defense with Stove Richardson. And they weren't ever able to get him on the field. But I think that kind of a defensive tackle is something that is going to be something that they're going to be looking at. And I think everybody's looking for someone like that, right? That those guys are hard to find. I think obviously with them parting ways with Luchez Purifoy, I think there's obviously going to be a need to fill that hole. But man, oh man, they had some lot of young guys that made impacts last year. Sione Tuyama, who came in and really was super impressive. You look at Manny Rugamba, who was super impressive at Sam. Like they put him in there, they couldn't take him out. And then you look at you talk about the defensive line, but I honestly don't think, looking back on it now, I don't think the two of them got enough credit. Was David Menard and Matthew Betts. Those two, that combination on the edge, my God, Menard had 9 sacks, Betts had 7. You mean, holy cow, they were unbelievable, the two of those guys off the edge. So it's always exciting going into a new year because you're always going to get a couple of new guys that are going to have impacts, and it's always exciting to find out who those next guys are going to be. But man, the Lions have done a great job of bringing in new young talent and have them make an impact. So with free agency, it'll be interesting to see, who they're able to retain and who they have their eye on as far as who they think can come in and make an impact on this team.
Then from a league perspective, when it comes to free agency, it's one of those classes that gets fans excited because it's a class where there seems to be a lot of quarterbacks available. And there's obviously the big market in Saskatchewan. They still don't have their clear-cut starter in camp yet. So what are you making of this whole free agency class? And then maybe a two-parter, like the quarterback situation. What do you think the Rough Riders and some other teams here end up doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I remember hearing at Grey Cup that McLeod Bethel Thompson might have played his last game, the Grey Cup. And I was just like, that kind of caught me off guard. I was like, really? Like, here's a guy who's been a journeyman his whole career, and all of a sudden, he gets to the pinnacle here, and all of a sudden he's going to walk away. I don't know. Like, and I know they're really high on Chad Kelly, so I don't know what's happening with him. He's McLeod Bethel Thompson's a free agent, is he not?
I believe so.
So, what happens to him? I don't know. I know everyone's talking about Trevor Harris, and they're talking about Dane Evans, although Dane Evans is still under contract in Hamilton. So now that they've signed Bo Levi Mitchell, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with him and how all that unfolds. But, to me, I wonder, what's Montreal going to do? Because Montreal, if they're parting ways with Trevor Harris, and Trevor is a veteran guy, we all know you need to have that presence, that veteran presence at the court. And there's not many. So you don't want to be, I don't know, you don't want to be kind of letting a guy go without having the backup plan. So if Trevor Harris has played his last game in Montreal, that to me is a big question mark. And then obviously now with Saskatchewan, they're they're going to be in on Trevor Harris if that's the case. That everyone was talking about Dane Evans obviously being another guy that could surface there. The one interesting one I found was Cody Fajardo going back to Montreal with Jason Moss, but he was in Saskatchewan with Jason Moss. So they, the way that ended, it didn't look good. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see where certain guys land. And then I think as well, the Lions I think will probably be in the market for a veteran backup quarterback as well. So there's a few guys out there. A guy like Nick Arbuckle, what happens to him? So I don't know. It's going to be very interesting because clearly, like a team like Saskatchewan, they need a quarterback, and that's a rabid fan base. That's a franchise that needs to start winning again, and they need to have a guy who can step in and make an impact. And there's only probably a couple of those guys on that list that can do that. So going to be interesting come February 14th as to where some of these guys land, because it's going to have a big impact on some of these teams' future.
And then obviously out east there, the big news from last week, Bo Levi Mitchell officially signs his 3-year deal with Hamilton. What do you make of all that? He's out of the West now.
Well, I was, I had heard a lot of stuff at Grey Cup too that, that wasn't a done deal as far as him being for sure signing in Hamilton, even though they had traded for his rights. Obviously there was a lot of talk about him maybe going to Saskatchewan, and I think there was more money maybe on the table outside of football for Bo. But, in the end, he ends up signing in Hamilton, and clearly with them hosting the Grey Cup this year, they're all in on trying to get there. Obviously Bo Levi's, he's a proven commodity. He's a guy that can still win in this league, and he's an exceptional quarterback. And if he stays healthy, he's going to make them better at that position. And really that was a key weakness for them last year, was the inconsistency at quarterback. So with Bo, I think if he stays healthy, they're going to be a very, very good football team.
Yeah, and seeing him, it's not really going to sink in until you see him on the field in those colors, sure. Right? That's, Yeah, so I know that was a big talking point Grey Cup week. You're right, as the deal for his rights at that point was already
Yeah, yeah,
traded, and
yeah. I
yeah,
mean, I think obviously when what happened with him in Calgary, you knew something was going to go on, and as I said, Hamilton's inconsistency at quarterback, you knew that they were going to go out and do something, right? They had to, and they were aggressive, and they made a bold move, and they went out and got a guy who's a future Hall of Famer and who is going to give him a level of consistency at that position. As I said, if he stays healthy, that's what you need in this league. I mean, we've all been in this league long enough to know that your quarterback makes it all tick. You got to have one, and if you're going to be competitive, and so teams realize that if they can get their hands on a good one, they're gonna go out because their chances of winning have gone way up.
that being said, Jake Mayer, yeah, won the job. Struggled a bit here in the playoff game, but I don't know if that was all his fault. If you're Dave Dickinson, are you rolling with him and Tommy Stevens, or are you maybe
Yeah,
trying to go look at bringing in a
yeah,
veteran safety
yeah,
net? What should the thought
yeah.
process
You
be
mean
there? Do you think?
the one thing I'll say about Dave in Calgary is that he is, and that franchise over the years has done such a great job of finding the next guy. That you know what
Mm-hmm.
if they don't do anything at quarterback and they go with Jake Mayer and they go with Tommy Stevens as their two guys, then that tells me that he has confidence that those two guys can be the next guys. I don't doubt his ability to judge quarterbacks and their potential. He's proven over and over and over again that he knows what he sees, and but you're right. If he has any kind of doubt as far as what he has, then maybe they are a player for a veteran quarterback that can that they can have in their back pocket. Now you got to remember Jake Mayer is the starter there, right? But when you come into that kind of scenario, all of a sudden when you become the guy, does it change, right? Like you're going into it now, you're the man, you're the guy that you don't have to look over your shoulder. You know that you're the guy. Does that change anything? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But again, I have all the confidence in the world that Dave Dickinson knows exactly what he's doing when it comes to quarterbacks, and he made that move halfway through the year, and it was probably a very difficult move for him to make, but it worked out for them. And Jake, I think, is the kind of guy that's going to have a very, very bright future in this league. So, the thing is, the reality, guys, that and I think every team's there's we can go right across the board, whether you talk about the CFL, the NFL, wherever. Quarterbacks are hard to find, and if you can find one, you better hold on to them because there are not many of them around there. There's a lot of guys that can throw a ball. There's a lot of guys that can run. There's a lot of guys that can do this, but can you find one that can do it in a game? Can you find one that when the pressure's on, when that anxiety and that being in that pocket, and you need to make split second decisions, can you do it? Um, there's not many that are exceptional, and we were very fortunate here in BC. We found one, and we found him for half a year, but um, he was special. And as I said, they're hard to find. So, um, you know, everybody's always looking for one.
On the topic of Bo and Hamilton, with you said that the Grey Cup's there next season, obviously in Hamilton. This is their move to get them a better chance at being in that
Mm-hmm.
home Grey Cup. Is over years being in this league, covering this league, that's something you see, right? From every year is the home city, they try to load up
Yeah,
the year
I
they're
think
hosting the
so.
Grey Cup.
Yeah, of course. I think that I mean, every team every year goes into their season hoping to win. They all want to win, but I think you're absolutely right. When you are hosting the game, there an added pressure to that. You know, knowing the kind of excitement that you can bring to your city if the host team is in it is something that is very special. We were fortunate, or I was fortunate enough to be on a team that we were lucky to play a Grey Cup championship at home, and I know how electric that was in the city, playing in that game and it being here in Vancouver. So, there's so many different layers to that. But of course, I think that every franchise wants to be able to, to be able to win at home when they host a game. It doesn't happen very often. So uh, I think that of course there's added pressure when you are hosting the game for sure.
That's good timing on that one because we had a question from one of our loyal listeners, young Judd. He wants to know what's the favorite moment of Julio's playing career. I think you might have just mentioned
No,
one of
no,
your favorites.
that is the crowning piece for sure. Like um, anytime you play a sport, and obviously when you get to the a professional level, to be able to say that you won a championship is the crowning achievement. There's nothing else that matches that. Um, there's just something there is just something that it doesn't matter. Like whenever I see anybody that's associated with that team, like my former teammates or a coach or whatever, we always talk about that team and the chemistry and how dysfunctional we were at times, but our ability to come
Mm-hmm.
together and win a championship and those are just that's what it's all about, really. Those kind of moments where um, you're able to go on a journey to try to win a championship, and you go through all the ups and downs, and to be able to at the end of the year hoist the trophy, um, is something that I think every athlete aspires to have happen. Um, but yeah, that's definitely my crowning moment. I mean, I was predominantly a backup quarterback, so obviously, I think from a personal level, I think my first start in Baltimore was probably a highlight. But as far as the everything else, I think the Grey Cup championship is clearly head and shoulders above everything else.
Remind us quickly the funny story about Baltimore. Once it was announced you were starting, the
Yeah, yeah,
spread
no, that's
changed
right. I was
drastically. Was that what happened?
Danny McManus was Danny McManus was the starter, and they decided late in the season. So Baltimore was God. We had beat them the year before in the Grey Cup, and then the following year, they were very good. Like they were, I think, I think they lost 2 games that year. They were dominant, and
Mm-hmm.
so we were playing them. I think in I want to say week 16 or week 15. It was late in the year, and I'll never forget too. Dave Ritchie was our head coach at the time, and I was in the quarterback meeting, and we're going over Baltimore's whatever and their defense and their scouting report, and he walks in, he has a seat, and he sits himself in our meeting. He looks at me, goes, "You're starting." Like in that Boston kind of, you're starting this week. You all right with that? And I was like, yeah, yeah, no, I'm all right with that. And then he just walked out. So the funny part was that I think the line on the game was 6.5 points in Baltimore's favor. We were playing in Baltimore, and it went from 6.5, I think, to 14.5 when they named me the starter. So clearly they didn't think that it was going to be a very competitive game. But I'll have you know, I did cover the spread. We only lost by 2
You did.
points.
It was 28-26. I've got it right here.
28-26, last second field by Carlos Huerta.
Yes.
If you ever remember him.
Yeah,
Remember him?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. 33,208 attendance at, what was it, Municipal Stadium? A lot of
Yeah,
history
it
in
was
that place.
I
The
still
old
guys,
Baltimore
I
Colts
still I
place.
still get a
Yeah.
little bit of I still get some goosebumps because Municipal Stadium there, if you remember, it was that the old football and baseball,
Yeah.
and it was old school because when you come under the stadium, it was you used to have to step up onto the field. So there was like 3 or 4 steps up onto the
Yeah.
field. So the dugout was really sunk down, the baseball dugout that we came out of. So I'll never forget that we were coming out of the tunnel there, and we were our offense was announced. They were announcing their defense. We were announcing our offense, and stepping up onto that field and in the crowd, you could it was something else. And the history in that stadium was, you know, Johnny Unitas. I think Cato put me in Johnny Unitas's locker So it was pretty cool. Something I'll never forget.
Wow, certainly an interesting era of this great
Yeah,
league.
for sure.
Listen, my friend, we always appreciate the time. We'll perhaps get you on. We'll get you on before camp once the roster looks to be more
Well,
set.
I'd be
And
disappointed if you didn't, Matt.
well, we'll have to talk to your agent. It's always a bit of a process.
Awesome, guys. I really appreciate it. I always love talking football with you guys. Love chatting. So thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Nick, I will see you, mister, next week.
Can't wait. Looking forward
Yeah.
to it.
Buckle up.
Appreciate it, Julio.
Hey, bring.
Okay, guys.
Get ready, Julio. Get. You're gonna see the show for real. Okay, so just bring your A game. Great stuff with Giulio Caravatta, and yeah, you guys are headed down to Arizona next week. Going to be fun. I was lucky to do, I think, 5 of those. The last one I did was in Arizona, the Seahawks and the Patriots. Malcolm Butler interception. That's a great. If you're going to go to a Super Bowl, Nick, that's probably one of the top 3 areas you can go cover one. New Orleans is number 1, by the way, but you're going to have a blast.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for this, and yeah, I'll be needing some tidbits from you on Phoenix, because I've never been actually to the city of Phoenix, so but looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, you've been to Scottsdale and some of the surrounding areas. Downtown
Yeah.
Phoenix, I'm guessing where a lot of the actual broadcast events are. But yes, definitely, I'll do my best to make sure you hit all of the great spots. National Football League, of course, the championship game, Chiefs, Eagles, and yeah, we'll get into some more of our predictions maybe closer to the date, but probably the 2 best teams in football. I know I was high on my 49ers going into the playoffs, but Philly, the most consistent team in the NFC, and really Kansas City. I know it's unfortunate that whole DeMar Hamlin situation, some people may say, complicated the top of the AFC, but that's not to take anything at all away from the Kansas City Chiefs, who played a 5th straight AFC title game at home. Maybe not the way you want a game to go as far as certain officiating moves. Maybe a couple of bad blunders, but full credit to Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, and the Chiefs. This should be a pretty good matchup, Nick.
Oh yeah, some great storylines here, but yeah, the KC game. I mean, Mahomes, he's cemented himself as the best quarterback in the league right now. Like that's clear.
Oh yeah,
And I like the storyline that it's Philly probably has the best D. You could argue maybe the best D line, just the front 4, and then they might have the best O line too, which are 2 very important positions in winning football games. So, to me, it looks like it's a matter of can Mahomes kind of not do it by himself, but he'll have to kind of pull another rabbit out of his hat to win this game against like a juggernaut in the Eagles. But yeah, a lot of good storylines. It's gonna be an interesting game.
and again, this to me this is kind of similar to the Chiefs Niners 3 years ago,
Yeah.
where people going in said, okay, San Francisco defense wins championships and they're a more complete roster, and maybe Kansas City is a little too reliant on magic from Patrick Mahomes, but in the end, it was enough. Again, still breaks my heart, the big 3rd and 17 to Tyreek Hill when it's 20-10, and that kind of opened the floodgates for a big 4th quarter. I think it's going to take, yeah, you said it's going to take something like that again. He's going to have to rely on Travis Kelce. Of course, Tyreek Hill's not there anymore, which to me adds more impressive stuff to that whole Chiefs story. People said, why would you trade a player like this? But they haven't missed a beat, 14-3, top seed again, and I think this is going to be a great one. And I don't know, I'm leaning toward Kansas City. Something tells me you don't keep getting back here and not always finishing. And if Kansas City doesn't win this one, all of a sudden it's okay, this great 5-year run, but only 1 ring to show for it. So I think Andy Reid, we always talk about him and how money he is coming off a bye. They're going to have a game plan specifically on offense, but probably going to be the toughest test they face this year.
Oh, big time, yeah. I'm going back and forth on this one. I'm probably not going to decide until maybe the day before. I'm kind of leaning Philadelphia though. Like you said, they've been the best team overall, and I think Jalen Hurts is a pretty dang good quarterback himself, and he does really well in that offense. So they have that going for them as well. But it's cool too. The first time, I know the story is getting kind of beat to the ground, but the first time two brothers are going against each other in the Super Bowl with Travis and Jason Kelsey. But I think that's a really cool story, actually. Like how wild that is.
Yeah,
It hasn't happened for a reason.
Yep, that's certainly going to be a big media storyline. Andy Reid, his old team, facing his old team as well. That I mean, it's been a long time. It's been over a decade now with Kansas City, and maybe some of the younger fans of this league maybe don't really remember Andy Reid as a Philadelphia Eagle, but he took them to a Super Bowl and lost to New England in February of 2005, I believe that it was the Patriots going back to back for the first time in their dynasty. So yeah, if you want storylines, yeah, hell, you got some great ones. And some pretty interesting NFL news this week. Of course, Tom Brady announcing his retirement. I believe him this time. I know there's some skeptical folks out there that still think he's going to resurface somewhere, but Father Time always wins out in the end. I don't think he was particularly bad this year, but clearly, talking about rosters that have holes, that Tampa Bay roster, 8-9 record, playing in a weak division, so maybe a flawed playoff team they were this year, but I don't think Tom's coming to the CFL either. I know some people were having fun with that, Nick.
Hey, free agency's in 12 days. But yeah, could you imagine him the biggest markets? Could you imagine him in Regina though?
Well, Regina, there's these reports that Montreal's minority owner, doesn't like Trevor Harris. Maybe it's all just a ploy to get Tom to go to Montreal. I mean, he was drafted by the Expos, remember? So maybe he finally goes to Montreal, but plays for the Alouettes.
He picks up a second language, yeah.
Imagine him walking into the small and cramped old facilities at Molson Stadium and him probably saying, "What the hell have I gotten myself into?" For those who have been inside Molson Stadium in Montreal, beautiful backdrop at McGill. Awesome. Great sight lines if you're there as a fan, I'm sure, but not exactly the best amenities, so to speak.
Yeah, it'd be a little cramped for him, for his style, I bet. I'll leave it at that.
Sean Payton. Yeah. Speaking of big names moving, Sean Payton, has that been officially announced by the Broncos? I know the compensation and stuff has been finalized, and Schefter and them have reported it, so it's as good as gold. But Sean Payton ending his one-year retirement, the Broncos giving up their late first-round pick this year, which they acquired in the Chubb trade, right? The Bradley Chubb deal, and then is it a second or a fourth rounder next year? Can't remember. But anyway, 2 draft picks going to the Saints, and Sean Payton will look to make history. Remember, Nick, no coach has ever won the Super Bowl with 2 straight teams. We just talked about Andy Reid, lost one with Philadelphia, then won one and lost one with Kansas City. Mike Holmgren won with Green Bay, went with Seattle. Those are just the 2 examples I think of off the top of my head who got back to one with another team. But Sean Payton, is he the one to turn Russell Wilson's fortunes around? We'll see.
That's exactly it, right? The Broncos are banking on a guru of an offensive coach to come in and salvage Russell Wilson. I was embarrassingly very high on Denver last season because I think they have good roster talent around Wilson, and it was more so maybe that offense and Wilson is not being able to click last year. But yeah, it's definitely, I think it puts them in decent contention. It's a tough division though, but I mean, they can at least probably compete a little better this season with Sean Payton at the reins. Another thought too, it's a rare trade for a coach. And I was thinking to myself, has that ever happened in the CFL, or can that even happen?
Yeah, I think it can, because I think this is way before your time, and the late Bob Ackles, the late great Bobby Ackles explained it in his book. The process that got Wally Buono here from Calgary was kind of like that. So the Calgary Stampeders had some issues with their ownership, and for whatever reason, they decided that Wally Buono wasn't going to be in their plans. So they in essence gave the Lions permission to talk, and they did, and they looked like they were working toward an agreement. And then all of a sudden, at the last minute, Calgary says, wait a second, we want compensation. So the Stampeders at one point were trying to get like Jason Claremont and some top of the line players, because I guess what happened was they were getting roasted in the media, and fans were lighting them up for essentially allowing Wally Buono to go. And then Ackles kind of said, well, wait a second, you never mentioned compensation when we started this. And it's like, well, we're mentioning it now. And so then they actually withdrew it all. So the talks broke off. It looked like Wally would go back to Calgary, but then cooler heads prevailed, and Wally ultimately ended up signing here without any compensation going the other way. So yeah, it can happen. I can't think of a direct example where it did happen from a coaching perspective. But and hey, I encourage you to check out The Water Boy. I can lend it to you. Great book that Bob wrote on his entire football career. Worked for the Dallas Cowboys and the Arizona Cardinals down south, Miami Dolphins too. In between his time here with the Lions, first as GM, then came back as president. And it goes without saying what Wally Buono did in terms of putting this franchise back on the map. But that's an example of where it was talked about. So yeah, it can happen, to your question.
That's very interesting, yeah. And just my first thought is the butterfly effect of all that with what Wally Buono was able to accomplish with the Lions. So yeah, that's interesting.
There you have it. So yeah, and I'm not back to Peyton itself. I'm not ready to sell all my Russell Wilson stock just yet. And I'm, coaching matters. I mean, maybe the situation there with Nathaniel Hackett was obviously not a match made in heaven. Some guys make great coordinators, some guys make great head coaches, but I don't like it for the simple reason I love Sean Payton as an analyst on Fox. Loved it. Sunday pregame shows. He did a regular Monday segment with Colin Cowherd, who's one of the favorites I listen to. So selfishly, I wanted Sean to wait at least another year before going back into coaching. But
isn't with Brady now retired? Does he not have a deal? I believe it's Fox. He had a deal lined up with to be it was a color commentator, though, correct?
Yeah, to be the number one analyst. So basically, the Greg Olson spot, right? With Kevin Burkhardt, and Fox has the Super Bowl. So you wonder, will Tom play a role somehow in the coverage? Does he end up going through with that being the analyst? Because I think Greg Olson personally did a really good job, and but I would imagine there's still a spot there for him, even if they put Tom Brady on the quote unquote number one crew. So that was an interesting element this year with Buck and Aikman going to ESPN, and I never really got used to them doing the Monday night game, but we're going to have to get used to it. So that crew on Fox got moved up to the top. Al Michaels, of course, doing the Thursday night now. Even that kind of threw you for a loop. Like you throw a game on Thursday night, you hear Al Michaels talking, and you're like, wait, it's not Sunday night. What? Why is he? And then it took a while for me to get used to all that shuffling.
Yeah, me too. And then I think Michaels did the Saturday night NBC Chargers Jaguars game, right? Or
that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of this new package is ESPN gets a Super Bowl as part of the rotation. I can't remember when that is. So like Buck and Aikman aren't going to give up a Super Bowl, right? So it's kind of interesting, I think, how that all worked out. So
a lot of moving pieces,
you are off to Arizona. You have fun. Perhaps we'll get you on when you're back. You can review the game, because I know you'll be busy with Moj and crew down there next week. So look forward to it. Post pictures.
Forward to it as well. Oh, I'll be posting a lot, but I'm gonna go on the record. If we don't record beforehand, I'm gonna go 28-20 for Philly. Put you on the spot.
Chiefs 34, Eagles 31.
That sounds like a fun one.
There'll be a couple lead changes in the fourth quarter. I think we're heading toward that type of game. It's going to be one we're talking about for a while. Has to be.
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Enjoy it, my friend. Be safe down there, and we will talk about some developing Lions news, I'm sure, in a couple weeks on First and Now. At Bakes Takes 84. He is at Nick_Kowalski. The podcast is at First and Now on Twitter. Subscribe, rate, leave a review, and we will talk to you in a matter of days.